Thank you. And on my way in, Ms. Patula and Ms. Rachel remind me to pick up a appreciation gift for those who are actually have served it in student ministry. I myself didn't do much other than come preach once in a while and well, help drive sofas here, right? Drop him off here. So, but those of you who actually served in a student ministry in this past year, please remember to pick up your gift, appreciation gift on your way out. Okay. So, but today want to talk with you about something which is related to the mission month. I call it, the topic is why me? Um, in mission month, we usually hear from missionaries like what they are doing, what they have been doing in the mission field. But today I actually want to kind of like unveil it a little bit. Why did they go to a mission field? What makes them go? And we want to look at this and then think about how we maybe God is preparing us to serve in some kind of mission work. But we want to look at the story of Esther, and I want to explore with you also how God individually calls us to personal missions and how we should respond when that call comes. So today's sermons, we would highlight two verses, Esther 4:14 and Romans 8:28. So let me just read for you. Actually, start with 13. Mordecai replied to Esther, "Don't think that you will escape the fate of all the Jews because you are in the king's palace. If you keep silent at this time, relief and deliverance will come to the Jewish people from another place. But you and your father's family will be destroyed. Who knows? Perhaps you have come to your royal position for such a time as this." And then Romans 8:28. We know that all things work together for the good of those who love God, who are called according to his purpose. Now, since some of you here might not be too familiar with the story of Esther, I will spend the bulk of today's message to summarize for you key events in that story and use Romans 8, especially 19 to 28, as our framework, as our lens to look in this story. But first, allow me to address this question that many of you would be asking when you're called to do anything, not just like to do mission work. Why me? When God called Moses at the burning bush to lead the Israelites out of Egypt, Moses tried to refuse. Why me? I am an 80 years old man. What can I do? God, why could you not send somebody else? Why me? The answer usually comes in two parts, in my experience, and talking to people and reading from different biographies. First, you are burdened. You cannot ignore the urgent need before you. You know that people are suffering terribly. Second, you understand the responsibility is yours alone. The mission is meant for you because you possess a certain unique position, certain unique experience or talent needed for the task. Long before you knew it, God had prepared you for this moment. In fact, throughout your whole life. So at that time, no one else could fulfill the mission that Moses was called to do. The same was true for Esther as we discover her story. So let me summarize the important events up to Esther 4:14, which is the words we just read. So King Xerxes I of Persia, according to extra biblical history, ascended to the throne in 485 BC. Christian tradition identified him as the King Ahasuerus in the book of Esther. So King Ahasuerus ruled 127 provinces from India to Kush, which is Egypt. In the third year of his reign, he held a feast on the seventh day when the king was feeling good from the wine, meaning half drunk. Ahasuerus commanded Queen Vashti to show before him with her royal crown. He wanted to show off her beauty. But Queen Vashti refused to come. The king became furious and his anger burned within him. He asked, what should be done with Queen Vashti since she refused to obey my command. One of his 7 chief councilmen, named Mahmud Khan, well, you have different pronunciation accent, but I pronounce it Mahmud Khan, answered, Queen Vashti has wronged not only the king, but all the other high officers and the people who are actually in every corner of your kingdom, your empire. For the queen's action will become public knowledge to all the women and cause them to despise their husbands. If it meets the king's approval, he should personally issue a royal decree. Her royal position is to be given to another woman who is more worthy than she is. So the king and his counselor approved the proposal. He sent letters to all the royal provinces, to each province in its own script, in its own ethnic language, that every man should be master of his own house and speak in the language of his own people. Sometime later, the king's personal attendant suggests, let a search be made for beautiful young virgins for the king. Then the young woman who pleased the king will become queen instead of Vashti. This suggestion pleases the king, and he did accordingly. There was a Jewish man named Mordecai. He was the legal guardian of his cousin Hadassah. That is later to be known as Esther, because she had no father or mother. The young woman had a beautiful figure and was extremely good looking. When the king's command and edict became public knowledge, Esther, like many women, was taken to the palace. Esther did not reveal her ethnicity or her family background because Mordecai had ordered her not to make them known. The king loved Esther more than any other woman. He placed a royal crown on her head and made her the queen. Esther still did not reveal her family background or her ethnicity as Mordecai had directed. She obeyed Mordecai's orders as she always had while he raised her. While the story of Esther was kind of unfolding, there were 2 other side stories about Mordecai. 2 of the king's eunuchs who guarded the entrance became infuriated and planned to assassinate King Ahasuerus. When Mordecai learned of the plot, he reported to Queen Esther, and she told the king on Mordecai's behalf. When the report was investigated and verified, both men were hung on the gallows. This event was recorded in the historical record in the king's presence. Another was this: King Ahasuerus honored Haman. The entire royal staff bowed down and paid homage to Haman because the king had commanded this to be done for him. But Mordecai would not. Mordecai would bow to no one but the true God. So Haman was filled with rage. He planned to destroy all the Jews throughout Ahasuerus' kingdom. Then Haman informed the king Ahasuerus, there is one ethnic group, scattered throughout the peoples in every province of your kingdom, keeping themselves separate. Their laws are different from everyone else, and they do not obey the king's laws. If the king's approved, let an order be drawn up authorizing their destruction, the whole people, the whole Jewish clan. The king removed his signet ring from his hand and gave it to Haman. The king told Haman, the money and people are given to you to do with as you see fit. So for each province in its own script and to each ethnic group in its own language, letters were sent, telling the officers to destroy, kill, and annihilate all the Jewish people and plunder their possessions on a picked day. That was actually, they cast a lot and picked that date. There was great mourning among the Jewish people in every province when king's command and edict reached. They fast, wept, and lament, and many lay in sackcloth and ashes. Mordecai commanded Esther to approach the king and plead with him personally for her people. But Esther replied, every man or woman who approaches the king in the inner courtyard and who has not been summoned, the death penalty. That was the rule. Unless the king miraculously, mercifully extend the gold scepter, allowing that person to live. You know, I have not been summoned to appear before the king for the last 30 days. Mordecai told the messenger to reply to Esther, don't think that you will escape the fate of all the Jews because you are in the king's palace. If you keep silent at this time, relief and deliverance will come to the Jewish people from another place, but you and your father's family will be destroyed. Who knows? Perhaps you have come to your royal position for such a time as this. Now, this is a rich and complex story, and we lack the time to examine every detail. I encourage you at some time in the future, read every single word in detail. A lot of theological implication there. But some observations are timely since we are in the mission month. First, this occurred during the height of the Persian Empire, spanning 127 provinces from India to Egypt. Persia belonged to the Mesopotamia, one of the great ancient civilizations, alongside India, Egypt, and China. And the number 127 is, well, for those who are kind of like more number sensitive, 2 to the power of 7 minus 1. So 127 provinces and the capital. But 2 and 7 signify completeness. So there is a part of this story that this is like the greatest empire at the time. Second, the Persian Empire were renowned for embracing multiculturalism. Like the United States, ancient Persia viewed diversity as the strength. Therefore, when the emperor issued a decree, they actually were proclaimed in multiple languages. Like here, sometimes you go to different places, they have Spanish, they have Chinese, they have different languages. So they make the announcement known in all the languages, really, of the regions and dialects. Third, while the Persian Empire embraces differences, power remains centralized, firmly in the hands of the king. And in fact, it was a patriarchal society. It was the father as the head of the household remained the cross-cultural consensus at the time. Therefore, Queen Vashti's disrespect towards King Ahasuerus was not only an affront to his imperial authority, but also a challenge to traditional culture. And these are aspects when we consider missions, civilization, language, and power structures. We need to think about them when we go into missions. Ancient Persia shares significant parallels with our postmodern society. Throughout history, also, Jews have been consistently faced all kinds of threats of ethnic annihilation. Even within diverse societies like Persia, they endure a lot of hatreds. Mordecai therefore instructed Esther to conceal her identity precisely because the Jews were actually aware of the difficult situation. But it should be remembered that the political reality of ancient empire, ancient Persia, is in a way very similar today. I mean, even in the 20th century, last century, the Jews faced the Holocaust. But there are also differences if you think about the political realities. The ancient empire was really ruled by a few people, right? There were kings, and then he has council. Today, at least in the democratic countries, people are king, unlike then. So when we translate what we learn from an ancient story like the book of Esther, we have to understand the translation of the power structure. King Ahasuerus and his advisors were agents. They were the earthly power brokers. In today's world, government is not the only power broker. So when we think about today, you have other power structure, you have influencers, you have all kinds of different punditries and people who have deep pockets. So when we think about how we approach a story like that and try to wrap a mission implication, these need to be looked at too. But when we think about how to apply or adapt this story from a modern conceptions, we must observe that today's Christians face choices comparable to Esther's decision. Now, as a good daughter, Esther was obedient to Mordecai, but when Mordecai asked her to break the palace law to appeal to King Ahasuerus, that put her in a moral dilemma, right? Who should her listen to? Now, there was also no guarantee that her appeal to the king would be accepted. Instead, in revealing her identity, she could face annihilation like her fellow Jews. This mirrors the plight among many Christians today, or faces throughout history, including, well, even our own time. Today's Christians who are openly religious risk discrimination in the workplace, in the neighborhood, well, in the civil society. Had Esther lived in our times, Mordecai's demand would be like asking her to come out from the closet. Christians speaking publicly are often being silenced, even today, what we call canceled. The political violence in the United States in recent years is truly shocking. Yet, we almost are numb to it. Especially, well, sometimes we see crazy things in a more politically left states like California. What should Christians do in this situation? I think we can learn some lessons from Esther. Esther could have chosen to stay quiet, hoping that God would send somebody else. But Mordecai warned her, right? If you remain silent, Jews, well, God could save them somehow, but you would be held accountable for your decision. Who knows? Perhaps you have come to your royal position for such a time as this. In other words, can't you see that God has prepared you your entire life for this very moment? The theme for today is, why me? As Christians, there are times when we'll be asked to take on rather challenging mission and rather difficult circumstances. It perhaps will make us wonder if, well, it was a mistake to ask me. Because, you know, this task that is asked of you carries tremendous risk. You know that, like rolling the dice, when you take on this mission, you might put yourself in harm's way. Well, you know, I already told you that, like, kind of we skip over, but it is sometimes to us is like rolling the dice, or in biblical times, casting the lots, or Purim. Purim, that's what it meant in Hebrew, casting the lots. Now, Haman actually picked the date to destroy the Israelites by casting lots. So for people who don't believe that there is a personal God who governs the universe, who controls every decision, every atom in the universe, life is ultimately determined by an impersonal fate. It's just like rolling the dice. And in fact, today, I mean, we have scientists, Darwinian, who think that life is merely a random selection process for the survival of the fittest. So it's casting the lot, rolling the dice. But Christians look at the world differently. We believe that the world is ruled by a personal God with intelligence, with a mind, with a purpose. When we are called to take on a mission whose outcome we cannot predict, we are not gambling our lives away. We do not know tomorrow, but we know who holds tomorrow, God. And God does not play dice. Indeed, there are things in this world beyond our control. Of course, we cannot change the fact that the world is fallen, people are born sinners, and all face a certain death. And life, it is a given that it carries with it more sorrow than joy. These are things that cannot be changed. These are all part of our destiny. It is true for everyone. As Paul stated, for the creation eagerly awaits with the anticipation of God's Son to be revealed. For the creation was subject to fertility, not willingly, but because of Him. that is God, who subjected it in hope. For we know that the whole creation has been groaning together with labor pains until now. But it's all not just hopeless, random destiny. The scripture tells us that the world is not merely mechanical. It's not a wheel of fortune machine. Because we all make our own decision when we face our own life challenges. It is like God is giving the same difficult test to everyone, yet you all get the same difficult questions, but how you answer those questions and the outcome of this test is still in your hands. You notice, for the sons of God have not yet been revealed. Who is the true heir to the throne? That is not only known at the end, at the grand finale. God and his children, therefore we possess a decision power. We have the freedom. And the choices we made sometimes are not known to people, but are only revealed at the final moment. So what we could say, as long as a person is not dead, you still have the opportunity to share the gospel with that person. As long as that person have not died, a person might still have a lot of opportunity to respond to a calling like becoming a missionary. The choice is still before us. In fact, that is the kind of task God is even giving you today. Sometimes God gives you a strong hint. What's the right answer? He just wants you to put it down in writing to show that you have the faith to give the correct answer and live it out. So there is still a choice before us. It's not all fate. It's still up to you. So how did Esther decide? Esther sent this reply to Mordecai. Go and assemble all the Jews who can be found in Susa and fast for me. Don't eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my female servants will also fast in the same way. After that, I will go to the king, even if it is against the law. If I perish, I perish. So Mordecai went and did everything Esther had commanded him. If I perish, I perish. Now, some might actually mistakenly interpret Esther's words, if I perish, through a more fatalistic or defeatist attitude. They might think Esther was like a warrior facing certain death. But, and then she was kind of doing it out of a kind of passive obedience as a matter of duty. Is Pastor Sam still here? Well, he had an ordination council, and we actually tease him a little bit. Do you really want to be ordained, or is it matter of a duty? Right? Oh, here, right. So we actually asked him that question. Do you really want it? No. See, the thing is, it's not just a matter of obedience. In truth, Esther was anything but passive. Why fast for 3 days and 3 nights if she were just passively accepting a certain death? If she was not trying to pray to God, appeal before God, why fast for 3 days and nights, abstaining from food and drink? So you think about it. Mordecai instructed Esther to appeal to the king, but Esther turned it around and gave Mordecai a command, at least a gentle reminder. Is appealing to a human being, a king, the most crucial matter? Indeed, is it not far more crucial at this moment to intercede before the Lord, King, the King of Kings? Now, Esther seemed a little bit unsure if the Persian king would actually heed her plea. Yet she did not state her fate on Ahasuerus' favor or his mercy. Rather, she approached the true king and put her trust in the Lord's hand. Was Esther certain that Mordecai was giving her a calling? Like sometimes you ask, how do I know that that was a true calling for me? She probably didn't know, not necessarily. But And Esther would normally be obedient to Mordecai, but here in this case, she ran into a moral dilemma because the Persian king had a rule that she shouldn't do that. It put her in an ethical dilemma. But Esther, so therefore you look at it, she did not blindly follow Mordecai, or she did not blindly follow the Persian court palace order. She pled her case directly before God. In fact, she ordered Mordecai and all Israelites to humble themselves and intercede for her before God. Esther declared, if I perish, I perish. It does not mean she was gambling her life away. It means that she's confident that if a prayer made to God is answered, then giving up her life is only a matter of necessary sacrifice. She is willing to do it because her life would have fulfilled God's purpose. As Paul reminded the Romans 8:26, in the same way the Spirit also helps us in our weakness, because we do not know what to pray for as we should, but the Spirit himself intercedes for us with inexpressible groanings. So returning to our main question today, how does God call us to mission? Like Esther, you might look back and realize that God has prepared you all your life, but then a specific situation arises. It is your moment. And God even sent people to call you out, to serve, to step up to the plate. But still, you must confirm that with prayer, sometimes with fasting. Esther made her decision with wisdom, with faith, and with courage. She didn't just blindly follow her father. She didn't blindly turn it down because of certain established human rule. Esther didn't care if she dies because she has confidence that she would have made it the right decision. Her righteousness is not judged by the outcome. Now, some missionaries, they entered the mission field and spent decades seeing only a few people come to faith. Others were even killed before they could even open their mouth and speak in the native language. Does it mean that they have failed? Not necessarily, if they take on their mission with wisdom, faith, and courage. The same is true for someone who attempts to explain the truth to an unreasonable generation. Sometimes you expect people to reason with you, they refuse. In fact, you try to try to say, okay, let's have a reasonable debate, and sometimes you get assassinated. Is this futile? Not necessarily. For seeds that fall into the ground and die could bear much fruit. It might even be the turning point for a whole generation. And sometimes God does things for his name that surprises our even best thought and prayer. For all things work together for the good of those who love God, who are called according to his purpose. So this actually is what that follows in the rest of the story of Esther. In a way, I think the rest of the story of Esther was a good illustration of what Romans 8:28 was talking about. So on the third day, Esther dressed in her royal clothing and stood in the inner courtyard of the palace facing it. The king extended the gold scepter in his hand towards Esther, saying, whatever you want, even half of the kingdom, I'll give it to you. If it pleases the king, Esther replied, may the king and Haman came today to the banquet I have prepared for them. So the king and Haman went to the banquet Esther had prepared. During the banquet, the king again asked Esther, what is your request? Esther replied, well, still a little bit coy, if I have found favor in the eyes of the king, may the king and Haman come to the banquet tomorrow, and I'll prepare for them. Tomorrow, I will do what the king had asked. That day, Haman left full of joy and in good spirit. But when Haman saw Mordecai at the king's gate, and Mordecai didn't rise, Haman was filled with rage. His wife, Zeresh, and all his friends told him, have them build a gallows 75 feet tall, and ask the king in the morning to hang Mordecai on it. Then go on the banquet with the king and enjoy yourself. The advice pleased Haman, so he had the gallows constructed. That night, sleep escaped the king, so he ordered a book recording daily events to be brought and read to the king. They found the written report of how Mordecai had informed on eunuchs who planned the assassination. So the king inquired, what honor and special recognition have been given to Mordecai for this act? The king's personal attendants replied, nothing has been done for him. Haman, well, I think by this time it's the morning, Haman was just entering the outer court of the palace. So the king asked Haman, what should be done for the man the king wants to honor? Haman thought it was himself, so he replied, have them bring a royal garment that the king himself has worn and a horse that the king himself ridden, parade him on the horse through the city square. The king told Haman, great, hurry, and do just as you propose for Mordecai. Haman went home. Haman told his wife Zeresh and all his friends everything that has happened. His advisor and his wife Zeresh said to him, since Mordecai is Jewish and you have begun to fall before him, you won't overcome him because your downfall is certain. While they were still speaking with him, the king's eunuchs arrived and rushed Haman to the banquet Esther had prepared. The king asked Esther, Queen Esther, whatever you ask will be given to you. Queen Esther answered, if I have found favor with you, your majesty, and if the king is pleased, spare my life. For my people and I have been sold to destruction, death, and annihilation. King Ahasuerus spoke up. He was surprised and asked Queen Esther, who is this? And where is the one who would devise such a scheme to kill you and your people? Esther answered, the adversary and enemy is this, Haman. The king arose in anger. One of the king's eunuchs said, there is a gallows 75 feet tall at Haman's house that he made for Mordecai, who gave the report that saved the king. So the king said, hang him on it. They hang Haman on the gallows he had prepared for Mordecai. Then the king's anger subsided. That same day, King Ahasuerus awarded Queen Esther the estate of Haman. The king removed his signet ring he had recovered from Haman and gave it to Mordecai, and Esther put him in charge of Haman's estate. The royal scribes were summoned. The edict was written for each province in its own script, for each ethnic group in its own language, and to the Jews in their own script and language. The Jews in each and every city has the right to assemble and to defend themselves, even to destroy, kill, and annihilate every ethnic and provincial army hostile to them, including women and children, and to take their possession as spoils of war. This would take place on a single day. The Jews designated these 2 days, so like a day of doing that and a day of rest, as Purim. The Jews bound themselves, their descendants, and all who joined with them to a commitment that they would not fail to celebrate these 2 days each and every year. So that usually happens in March sometimes. So we can see the significance of this story for the mission month, I hope. It serves as a testimony through the Persian Empire, reaching every language and the 127 provinces. At the very least, it was sufficient to bring some foreigners, some Gentiles, to become Jews. I'm sure some did so out of fear of the Persian king, but I'm also sure some others, when they heard of this miraculous story, they did it out of reverence for the God of the Jews. In fact, even before all this nation knew about it, we read the story. Haman's wife and his friends already foresaw his inevitable downfall. they had long understood the outcome, ultimately unable to resist the miraculous deliverance of the Jews. I think the deeper revelation of this story lies in how this experience of deliverance gives birth to faith. The Jews celebrate Purim year after year because of all the instruction in this letter, as well as what they witnessed and what they saw happening to them. They believe because not only they heard about the story, they witnessed it themselves, they experienced it themselves. I think today we are no different. Stories of God's deliverance have established faith in us. So that's why you hear Pastor Abraham Cho and I talk about all the times. It's like we want you to experience the work of mission. We want you to just don't hear it from the Bible, but you live it, and then you can know that it is true. Esther's choice made with wisdom, faith, and courage is the pivotal point in this story. It is the turning point. So why me? Precisely because God knew everything beforehand, including Esther's decisions. Nothing was really random. Nothing was playing the dice. For those whom he foreknew, he also predestined to conform to the image of his Son, in order that he may be firstborn among many brothers. And those whom he predestined, he also called. Those whom he called, he also justified. And those whom he justified, he also glorified. Let us pray. Dear Heavenly Father, when we come to you and seek your counsel and seek your wisdom, I know that you are willing to give it to us because you promise it in your word. Those who humble before you and seek wisdom, you will grant it to him or her out of your mercy. Because we know that sometimes we do not know what to do. But when we come before you, you will give us the answer. So whatever we are deciding, whether to go on a mission or take on a leadership role, even in a school, help us to see the opportunity as a way to glorify you. So that when we make the decision, it's not just rolling the dice, but we know that, God, you have prepared us for this moment. Give us the courage to step up to the plate, to speak up, to serve others. I pray in Jesus' name. Amen.